seems clear to me that people are currently too blinded by their party loyalty to see what's really taking place. Many Trump supporters equate the current civil unrest with a cleaning of house, perchance a return to the rule of constitutional law. Under these parameters, you would expect some unavoidable conflict.
I think it's actually really simple. When you look at the bigger picture of everything that's going on and how things operate, it's not an exaggeration, it's just 1 + 1 = 2. Where are we currently? I have a few predictions. I said, I try to be too light. I'm too scared of my own thoughts on the matter. I said a year from now there's going to be another terror attack or assassination because these attacks freak people out. Everyone always says it's the economy, stupid, but there's one thing that trumps the economy, and it's security, when people are scared. This is a fact statement, not an opinion. You need only look at the approval rating of George W. Bush after 9/11. The economy is meaningless when people are scared for their lives. If the attacks by Antifa and the far left escalate and regular people fear and feel like they're in danger, they are going to vote for security. This, again, is a well-known political phenomenon across the world, and it is tracked easily in the United States over the past several decades.
But what if this is intentional conflict, leading to further escalations of violence, further destabilizations of community? More and more I feel that there is an aspect to all of this which feels intentionally prolonged. With foreign wars abroad and civil unrest at home, how is the economy supposed to recover from recent unpleasantness? And now, how will it ever, when our post-industrial horizon is dotted with the menace of AI job obsolescence? From a basic humanitarian point of view, we are on the wrong side of 2 foreign wars, and again, observing massive escalations of so-called civil unrest and political violence here at home. Let's discuss these shell casings being found inscribed with radical militant statements, ostensibly moronic. Seemingly mainstream, middle-class assassins have left inscribed shell casings behind. How the hell do you inscribe whole sentences and phrases on the shell casing of something as small as a bullet without professional knowledge and training? It's not something that just comes into ordinary people's minds to do, which makes me rather convinced that a government agency is either supplying these inscribed bullets to their groomed operatives or planting them on the unfortunate patsies. It's very obvious to me that this ongoing pre-Civil War tension simulation is intended to drive the escalation to a boiling over point, well beyond anything that can still be phrased as, quote, civil unrest. Basically, they intend for things to get so bad that they can then declare to the public that the only way that we can quell the violence in our streets is to submit to a new form of life under an all-pervasive biometric surveillance system entirely governed by AI. This is the Palantir contract.
The frontmen for AI deployment have all fomented fear into the mainstream narrative.
I think if this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong.
Regulations are really only put into effect after something terrible has happened.
That's correct.
If that's the case for AI, and we only put in regulations after something terrible has happened, it may be too late to actually put the regulations in place. The AI may be in control at that point.
You think that's real? It is conceivable that AI could take control and reach a point where you couldn't turn it off and it would be making the decisions for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
No, that's definitely the way things are headed, for sure.
Former Google CEO Eric Schmidt says that every government is now engaged in a race to build robotic AI military systems.
For thousands of years, we've had the notion of stereotypically a man and a gun fighting another man and a gun, or with a horse or what have you. We're now breaking that connection forever. So all of a sudden, the logic of everything that we in our military do just doesn't make any sense, right? You should be building attritable, automated robotic systems for defense and offense.
This is what Palantir is developing in the Middle East, a robotic AI human killing machine. And it is what President Trump is developing in the United States. with Peter Thiel, a name with a fitting anagram for MAGA's technocratic poster child, the reptile. Peter Thiel shows no sympathy for the genocidal murder he is helping execute with Palantir, and he believes the future is transhumanism.
A number of people deeply involved in artificial intelligence see it as a kind of mechanism for transhumanism, for transcendence of our mortal flesh. Is it hype? Is it delusion? Is it something you worry about? I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
Should
in this.
the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. A transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross-dresses, and a transsexual is someone where you change your penis into a vagina. And we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little. And we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. Science fiction author Isaac Asimov wrote The 3 Laws of Robotics in 1942. All of which were based on doing no harm to humans, and all of which have already been broken. The experts push fear, and Peter Thiel explains why.
You have been giving talks recently about the concept of the Antichrist. What does that mean to you? What is the Antichrist?
In all these Antichrist books, people wrote, how does the Antichrist take over the world? He gives these demonic, hypnotic speeches, and people just fall for it. And so it's this plot hole. The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. You talk about existential risk nonstop. And this is what you need to regulate.
You're saying the real Antichrist would play on that fear and say, you must come with me to avoid Skynet, to avoid the Terminator, to avoid nuclear Armageddon.
Yes.
It just seems to me that when you tell me a story about the Antichrist coming to power and using the fear of technological change to sort of impose order on the world, I feel like that Antichrist would maybe be using the tools that you were building, right? Like, wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done, how you get to a world willing to submit to permanent authoritarian rule.
Well, but again, there are these different gradations of this we can describe, but Greg Reese reporting.
Particularly no conflict in the world where Palantir is not the first call.
Well, I love the idea of getting a drone and having light fentanyl-laced urine spraying on analysts who tried to screw us.
I had all sorts of fantasies of using drone-enabled technology to exact revenge, especially targeted in violation of all norms.
All right, a strong quarter. That might be an understatement. When we're speaking about Palantir, their first quarter where revenue topped $1 billion.
In the end, the rights you give up will be used against you.
Millions of Americans have files in government databases, their movements, purchases, and communications connected by software from a company called Palantir. And the worst part, we helped fund its creation. What exactly does Palantir do? Palantir has current and past contracts with the FBI, DHS, IRS, CDC, SEC, and the Pentagon. They process data for police departments in multiple countries, healthcare networks including the United Kingdom's National Health Services, Cleveland Clinic managing patient care across hospitals. They're in the banks processing your transactions, the factories building your cars, Tyson Foods monitoring production facilities, and Fortune 500 companies from Wendy's to General Mills. In a letter from Alex Karp, he states, "We have chosen sides, and we know that our partners value our commitment. We stand by them when it is convenient and when it is not." This is the CEO saying that they will support the government agencies regardless of what these agencies choose to do. No moral boundaries, no questions asked, even when it's not convenient, meaning when it's morally wrong. This is a company explicitly saying they'll enable any government action, seemingly no matter how authoritarian, as long as the check clears. Palantir operates in over 50 industries across at least 35 countries. Their CEO openly states their mission to become the US government's central operating system, all while fear-mongering and using war rhetoric. The same software tracking you at a protest is also identifying targets on the battlefield.
Palantir is here to disrupt and make our institutions we partner with the very best in the world, and when it's necessary, to scare enemies and on occasion kill them.
To understand how one company has gained this much power, we need to go back in time. In 2002, the US government created something called Total Information Awareness. The goal, exactly what it sounds like. Total information, track everything and everyone. Every email, every purchase, every movement, every medical record. Total Information Awareness sought to keep track of every American citizen, even going so far as to identify citizens based on how they walked. Americans at the time were outraged, claiming the US government was attempting to mass surveil its citizens. Congress responded to the backlash by defunding the program in 2003. Democracy worked, privacy won, and the start of a surveillance state was defeated. Or so we thought. Because in the exact same year, 2003, something curious happened. A new company was founded called Palantir. It was founded by none other than Peter Thiel, who at the time had just sold PayPal for $1.5 billion. But here's what most people don't know. At PayPal, Thiel had already built systems that tracked unusual patterns across millions of financial transactions. He had already proven that mass surveillance could work. He just needed to scale it up. Aside from Thiel, Palantir had one other early investor, the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA. Palantir was advised by former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, former CIA Director George Tenet, and John Poindexter. Now, who is that? Well, he's the former National Security Advisor to President Reagan. He was also the man put in charge of Total Information Awareness. When I look at the technical architecture of Total Information Awareness and compare it to that of Palantir's Gotham software patents, they're nearly identical. In my opinion, the surveillance state was never stopped. They just privatized it. This is the power of Gotham. An analyst can type in a single name, maybe yours. Within seconds, Gotham pulls everything it knows about you from connected databases. Your driver's license, passport, criminal records, employment history, financial transactions, people you've communicated with, and even your dog's vet records. But Gotham doesn't just compile the data, it looks at behaviors, identifying your routines, relationships, and most importantly, anomalies. Change anything in your routine, the system notices and alerts analysts. Gotham was built for the United States intelligence community to track potential terrorists after 2001. The same Gotham instance tracking potential threats overseas is being deployed by local law enforcement. The Los Angeles Police Department uses it for predictive policing. The New York Police Department has used it for gang monitoring, and ICE uses it to track immigrants. The same algorithms designed for military operations are being used on civilians. Gotham operates with law enforcement in the UK, Netherlands, Germany, France, and Denmark.
You may not know it, but almost every European country in some form or another uses our CT product, counterterrorism product. We always have to sign these contracts. We can't talk up in Europe about who uses our product, which is slightly annoying because I'm constantly getting yelled at by people who are protected in our product.
But tracking people was just phase one. Palantir would do something even more dangerous and lethal: automated targeting. In 2017, the Pentagon launched Project Maven with a simple goal: teach AI to identify targets, not just vehicles or buildings, but people. The system would analyze drone footage, satellite imagery, and surveillance video to autonomously detect, classify, and track human beings. Google took the initial contract, $15 million to build the prototype. But something remarkable happened. Over 3,000 Google employees signed a petition with dozens of other employees resigning in protest. Their message was clear. They didn't want to build war technology. Google withdrew from the project in 2018, but the Maven project wasn't abandoned. It just found a new home.
You have reportedly taken over Project Maven from Google, which was a very controversial program in Silicon Valley.
Well, I can't discuss the specifics of a classified program, but I can say if this were true, I'd be very proud. Military AI will determine our lives, the lives of your kid. This is a zero-sum thing. The country with the most important AI, most powerful AI, will determine the rules. This program will quite literally determine who is standing here and what they're saying in 5 years. And were we to be involved with it, I would be enormously proud.
In 2019, Palantir eagerly accepted the contract that Google rejected. And unlike Google, Palantir had no moral qualms about building war technology.
Palantir is also delivering AI through Maven Smart System, allowing customers like the 18th Airborne to match the performance of what used to be a 2,000 staff targeting cell during Operation Iraqi Freedom to a targeting cell of roughly only 20 people today.
On the targeting on the battlefield, we've talked about basically 2 orders of magnitude in reduction of people.
Think about that. An operation that used to require 2,000 military personnel now reduced down to just 20 people. A 100-fold reduction in human oversight for such a critical decision. Maven isn't limited to one branch of the military. Palantir has signed contracts to expand Maven across the entire Department of Defense. It's also not limited to just the United States. Earlier this year, NATO completed a deal to acquire Maven for all 32 NATO countries. Palantir is partnered with the Five Eyes, consisting of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the US, and the UK. They have additional partnerships with coalition partners.
We are seeing rapid expansion and very significant demand for Maven, both in America and outside of America, as all part of our core mission to provide an unfair advantage to the noble warriors of the West.
But here's the scam that Palantir has perfected. When Palantir and the US government work together to build some type of software, the US government is paying Palantir with taxpayer money. Effectively, we've funded the creation of the software that Palantir owns. They own the patents on the software. That also means in order for the US government to be able to use said software, they have to pay a licensing fee. Us taxpayers fund the US government doing a second contract to be able to use the software that we already funded and Palantir owns. Palantir then takes the software and sells it to other governments, profiting off of our money, basically. It's the perfect scam. In 2009, JP Morgan Chase hired Palantir for internal threat assessment. JP Morgan gave Palantir access to employee emails, GPS data from company phones, printer and download activity, and transcripts of digital recorded phone conversations. Palantir's algorithms analyzed all of this data to identify possible criminal behavior. Employees who badged in late were flagged as potentially disgruntled. This would trigger further scrutiny and possibly physical surveillance by JP Morgan's security teams after work hours. But then something unexpected happened. JP Morgan executives discovered they were also being monitored. Top executives found their own emails and activities being monitored by the same system they'd deployed on employees. The collaboration ended in controversy, but Palantir had learned something very valuable. Corporate America would pay for surveillance. They packaged these new capabilities into a software called Foundry, rebranding surveillance as operational intelligence. Software wasn't enough. In 2024, Palantir became the first software company in history to win a prime hardware contract from the US Army. $178 million coming from taxpayers to fund the development of Titan, the tactical intelligence targeting access node. Titan isn't just software running on military hardware. It's a mobile command center, essentially a high-tech truck that becomes the physical hub for integrating operating multiple surveillance systems like satellites overhead, high-altitude drones, ground sensors and cameras, and vehicle-mounted surveillance, all feeding into one vehicle being processed by Palantir's AI in real time. Palantir's founders weren't just building technology, they were building an ideology.
At the dawn of World War II, we didn't have a defense industrial base, we had an American industrial base. Chrysler made missiles, and General Mills wasn't just a cereal company. This is also what our future must look like. It is clear that the nation must reindustrialize and mobilize at warp speed to win. This platform will transform production and the value chains that power our kill chains.
Palantir wants to redirect civilian manufacturing to military production through software alone.
What they're not understanding is the technical revolution now is so great, you got to get on the train. Because that train is leaving. You're being left behind, and by the way, I'm happy you're being left behind.
Alex Karp, the CEO, doesn't hide his beliefs.
If you've done something big and important, you're probably a good person. There was this famous professor, Ken Arrow. And if Ken Arrow said you were smart, you got tenure. It was because people knew Ken Arrow is smart. The institution he represents is the best in the world. There is no one like, honestly, the only thing like that currently in tech is a Palantir degree. If you work for Palantir, everyone knows you're good. Like when we went to school, the schools actually had credibility. The science was actually science.
Karp also brags about how they can change human behavior, how American manufacturing workers can become Japanese workers by using the software to change their behaviors.
One of the advantages of AI is that if you want to do manufacturing, say you want to do Japanese manufacturing in America, you're actually having to use Japanese methodologies with American workers. Heretofore has not been possible. AI can actually allow you to manage the internal dynamics of your workforce so that you get the Japanese culture with American workers in the U.S.
This isn't just a tech CEO. This is someone who sees the world through permanent conflict and profits from it. He's also vocal about how Americans will accept surveillance if it's for the benefit of them, to protect themselves and the country, but protect from who exactly?
We love disruption, and whatever's good for America will be good for Americans and very good for Palantir. And I think you got it exactly right. Disruption, in the end of the day, exposes things that aren't working. There'll be ups and downs. There's a revolution. Some people can get their heads cut off. We're expecting to see really unexpected things and to win. And we're planning to do that, and we're pretty optimistic about the U.S. environment.
Conflict and unrest is profitable.
We have been saying and building products for a world that is violent, disjointed, irrational, a world in which you have to show strength, a world in which if you do not show strength, people who are biased, xenophobic, will rear their head.
Chaos drives growth. Peace and prosperity threatens the business model.
We have seen that our view of the world, which is that there really are people that are violent and not in conformity with morality, need to be fought. And we are going to bring our warrior culture to our products, to our market fit, and the results of which we are going to bring to our allies.
When a company's revenue is dependent on conflict, there's a clear incentive to find enemies everywhere.
That focus on civil liberties is making us really rich, which drives the woke, pagan, religious practicing, Neanderthal thinking people who ignore technology absolutely nuts on the right and the left.
Every earnings call, every public appearance, he repeats the same messages: collapse, crisis, existential threat. He makes it seem like we're living in this permanent emergency and only Palantir can save us. What makes Karp different from other CEOs and effectively more dangerous is he doesn't need you. When Target's CEO makes controversial decisions, customers boycott, revenue drops, the CEO resigns. Karp can say whatever he wants on earnings calls because his customers aren't the American people. It's the apparatus that surveils them. But the true genius of their strategy isn't in any single product. It's in how they've woven themselves into the fabric of governments, law enforcement, and corporations until these institutions can no longer operate without them. Palantir isn't just another government contractor. In my opinion, they've made themselves irreplaceable. And it started with a lawsuit that changed everything. In 2015, the U.S. Army sought a single contractor to build a custom software system from scratch. Palantir sued them, claiming federal law requires the government to consider the purchase of commercial software before building custom solutions. The Army fought back, but ultimately Palantir won. Think about what that means. A private company successfully sues the United States Army, leading to the Army eventually purchasing Palantir's software.
I don't think in win-lose. I think in domination. I don't like this win-lose thing because it kind of presupposes okay to lose. And I think domination is important because I think if it's just about money, if it's just about winning, if it's just about having prestige, for me, that's not enough to do that. That's not enough because that is just real, and it's super humiliating.
Suing the government in hopes that they will eventually purchase their software was just step one. The evil genius of Palantir is how they deploy engineers. In Palantir contracts, they include what they call forward deployed engineers. These are Palantir engineers who embed themselves directly into agencies, in the Pentagon, the CIA, and even in combat zones. They don't just install software, they build custom solutions that only they understand. The knowledge of how it works stays with Palantir, and after a while, agencies become completely dependent on these solutions.
What is the product we can build that will create the product we ought to build? Not even the product the customers wanted, whether it was government or commercial. We never built the product the customer asked us to build. We built the product that they ought to ask us to build.
Then there was the executive order titled Stopping Waste, Fraud, and Abuse by Eliminating Information Silos. Sounds reasonable, right? I mean, who doesn't want efficiency? The order directs federal agencies to share information, breaking down the walls between agencies like the IRS, Social Security Administration, Medicare, and Medicaid. The Privacy Act of 1974 was specifically designed to prevent this kind of cross-agency data sharing. Now, through the private contractor loophole, aka Palantir, and this executive order, those protections are effectively circumvented. The Army consolidated 75 separate contracts into one and awarded it to Palantir. It is a single contract worth $10 billion being awarded to one company. The financial reality makes removal impossible. Billions in sunk costs, years of custom development that can't be used elsewhere, entire operations that would collapse without the platform. When the governments run surveillance, there are restrictions. There's congressional oversight, Freedom of Information Act requests, constitutional limitations, and public accountability. But when a private company does surveillance, there are limited oversight requirements. And even then, those requirements can have loopholes. Now, Palantir claims that their software includes privacy protections, and that they're not storing data. They just analyze it, even though they have their own cloud storage service. They claim there are audit trails, access controls, and oversight mechanisms built in. But here's the problem. Those protections only work when someone's watching the watchers. When the same system is used by the CIA, the FBI, your local police department, who exactly is checking those audit logs? When Palantir's own engineers have root access to customize the system, what do those access controls really mean? More importantly, these privacy safeguards don't change the fundamental reality. A private company has built profiles on millions of Americans, and regardless if these profiles have audit trails or not, they exist. The same Palantir tracking you through Gotham is processing your insurance claim through Foundry, guiding military drones through Maven, and controlling manufacturing through Warp Speed. For over 20 years, U.S. taxpayers have given Palantir $2.7 billion in federal contracts. And that's just what's publicly documented. Classified budgets likely add billions more. We effectively paid them to build the surveillance state that Congress explicitly rejected. When you build your entire business on conflict, peace becomes the enemy. Stability threatens profits. Democracy, with its messy debates and privacy laws, gets in the way. In my opinion, when a private company can sue the U.S. Army, making it so that the U.S. Army has to buy their software, when these soldiers and law enforcement become completely dependent on this software, and when we have an executive order that consolidates all of federal agencies' data into one platform, it starts looking more like an institutional takeover. As Karp said himself, we become part of the institutions we serve. Should one private company have this much power, this much reach not only in governments but corporations all over the world? Should the same company tracking terrorists be tracking civilians? The surveillance state isn't coming. It's here. It's been lurking in the shadows for over 20 years. They just called it Palantir.
Trump's deal with Peter Thiel's Palantir project, which involves a digital ID, 24/7 biometric surveillance of you and everything you do, say, purchase, or want. The purpose of this perpetual surveillance is so that the government, by way of a concentration of globalist corporations, can evaluate your behavior and choices, giving you a social credit score, which then determines what percentage of freedoms, if any, you are permitted in your life, down to whether you're permitted to drive, buy groceries, or even earn an income.
Or digital ID wallets, or whatever name they call it. In Italy, it's the green passport. We have new names, and they keep morphing them down to market it. If it snaps into place with an all-digital financial system, including CBDCs, they will convert our home, our car, and our communities into digital concentration camps. And I don't use that term lightly. At that moment, there will be no hope of building anything. We will have entered into a slavery system in which a handful of the most powerful people in the world can strip you and I of our assets, of our children, and control literally every aspect of our life, where we go, what we read, what we say, and what we eat. And of course, as you know, they're planning insects and synthetic food. We have 1, maybe 2 years to stop it. If we don't, most of what we're discussing here today will be moot. So we need to be designing local currencies, but not for our digital concentration camps. We need to make sure that doesn't happen.
They're not warning you because they care. They're warning you because it's already too late. Bank of America says the dollar may collapse. National debt is exploding. Bitcoin and gold are spiking, but the elites aren't panicking. They're preparing. They're moving out of cash and into assets they can control. This isn't chaos, it's a planned reset. Is this really about protecting the economy? Or are they crashing the dollar on purpose to force a digital currency takeover? Meanwhile, secret deals are being inked behind closed doors. Hedge funds and banks are stockpiling rare earth metals, farmland, and clean water rights. Panic in the streets will follow the shock when cash loses its power. Governments will introduce surveillance wallets they can track and control. They'll sell it as efficiency, security, necessity, but it's the death of privacy and financial sovereignty. If you're awake, you already know what to do.
The protocols for how citizens will be scored are placed entirely under the control of AI. The data centers have already been built, and there will be more to follow, meaning that the money has already been spent. Now all that they require is a purge to bewitch us into our new and permanent slavery. The question simply becomes, will Trump recognize the danger of turning our entire culture and tradition of constitutional freedom and self-governance over to the same inhuman digital beast system that enslaved China? Or has he been in on this Hegelian dialectic all along, playing his role?
You may have heard about the UK's new tech prosperity deal, which will see some £30 billion of investment into AI across the island in the next few years here. It mirrors the US Project Stargate that was announced by President Trump on day 2 of his new administration, not just in structure, but even in name. We read here that part of the data center construction is actually literally being called Stargate UK. But in case there was any doubt that this is actually a single integrated agenda way over nation states. But here from the BBC, we can read that the usual players are involved: Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, NVIDIA. But one that the BBC neglects to mention is a new partnership with Palantir. Here from gov.uk, we can directly read about how the Ministry of Defense is aligning with Palantir to be at the leading edge of defense innovation. And I want to just take a look at some of the language that they use in this article, because it's pretty telling. So here from gov.uk, quote, Palantir and the UK military will work together to transform lethality on the battlefield, supporting the development of data and AI-powered capabilities across data analysis, intelligence, decision-making, and targeting systems. And in case that's not specific enough, we can continue reading. Some of these new capabilities will support development of what is known as the kill chain, whereby military planners fuse a wide range of information and data sources from open source and military platforms to provide military commanders with faster options for attacking enemies. And I just think this is worth pointing out because as people's electric bills are going sky high, and as we're hearing about water shortages here and there because both of these things are being consumed by the behemoth data centers that are being created for this AI global surveillance system, of course, they're dangling a carrot, right? They've got their promises of it's going to make everything better, it's going to be a new AI future for all of us, when in reality, and indeed directly from the government's own writings on their website, it's about transforming lethality. It's about improving battlefield technologies and targeting systems. In fact, we also read down here that a lot of this technology from Palantir has already, quote, been proven on the battlefield in Ukraine. And now it's coming to your backyard. Folks, when the government tells you that they're going to improve their lethality in your backyard, you should believe them. One other thing that I do think is worth pointing out here to underscore that this isn't about tech prosperity and it's not an investment in the future, it's an invasion of this AI grid beastly system across all aspects of life, is that Palantir, as part of this tech prosperity deal, has offered to provide pro bono consulting and mentoring to defense startups and medium enterprises in the UK ecosystem. Pro bono, of course, means free. So why would Palantir be going in and providing free consulting to many startups across the UK? Well, clearly, I think this makes the case that this is not about dollars. It's not about profit. It's about getting their tentacles on the data. That's why it's worth their time to send in consultants to help you figure out how to feed the beast. All right? So I just thought this would be, keep this super short to make it a kind of a decode of the rhetoric that's being posted and then the reality that's actually being executed on actively right now on a daily basis everywhere around us. So spread the word about this. People need to understand what's going on.
I want to believe the best, but cannot help noticing where this all appears to be going. We now have undeniable hindsight about the recent unpleasantness. If you don't already understand that we have, as a people, been stress tested for compliance, please re-examine the time we have just come through.
In 2020, images of people in China dropping in the street went viral, using a knee and hands to break the fall. Not in the same style as millions were collapsing after 2020 by using their face to break the fall. The exact same message of fear was parroted in real time across the world by the media. And the governments of the world all agreed, for the first time ever, to tear up their own emergency pandemic preparedness protocols, the ones developed by medical experts and refined over years with consultation and discussion, so that when an emergency arises, emotion and panic doesn't get in the way. Yes, that's the one they all tore up without hesitation. And then within a fortnight, the whole world was in lockdown, and people were locked in their homes, another world first. Because it was such a dangerous disease that you had to be tested to know that you had it. So virulent and transmissible, you had to keep 6 feet apart for, but to get a swab sample, drill all the way to the brain. And even if it did exist, could only kill people on average older than life expectancy itself. Or as Boris Johnson joked, get COVID, live longer. I say even if it did exist, because despite many freedom of information requests and court proceedings, no scientific documentation has ever been produced to show its isolation. It's a well-known fact. The best ways to avoid and fight off disease is to exercise, get sunshine, eat a healthy diet, and breathe fresh air. So they closed the gyms, locked everyone in their homes, kept chain fast food and liquor stores open, and enforced masks. Masks, which in 2020 Fauci said were useless. Then he said they were essential. Then 2 masks. Then the more masks the better. until finally confessing in 2024 that he made it all up, including the 6 feet apart. And these are the same masks which in 2003 the Australian government issued $110,000 fines to retailers for if they exaggerated the health benefits of. A lot of people assumed those in charge were looking after them. They looked after children by closing schools, banning social interactions, and forcing masks on them. They looked after lovers by either separating them, locking them up together, cancelling their wedding, or by taking away their livelihood. They looked after the chronically ill by denying them medical care. Disease went undiagnosed and hospital visits were blocked. They looked after the religious by paying churches to close their doors. They looked after the abused by locking them up with their abusers. They looked after families by separating them over borders. They looked after the elderly by isolating them from their family. They looked after the dying by banning loved ones to be by their side, then banned family from attending their funeral. You weren't allowed to visit family, but you were allowed to visit a brothel. Small businesses were forced to close, but chain stores remained open. There was 2 weeks to flatten the curve, which turned into 4, 8, 12, or with Victoria, 37 weeks, all with the promise of a vaccine that's on the way, which will let everyone out of their homes because it will stop you from getting it and passing it on.
And that vaccine, key goal is to stop the transmission, to develop a plan for the world to globally eliminate COVID-19.
They locked the entire state of Victoria down with 6.5 million people for less than 20 cases, which is impossible given PCR has a 5% false positive rate. The inventor of PCR, Carrie Mullis, said, "It can't tell you if you're sick, and if you run enough cycles, it will show anything." Carrie Mullis was a strong critic of Tony Fauci, but ended up dying mysteriously in August of 2019.
Tony Fauci does not mind going on television in front of the people that pay his salary and lie directly into the camera.
While the world was locked in their homes, politicians partied and took off their masks whenever they thought the cameras weren't rolling.
We should all be wearing a mask.
Hospitals were told to put COVID on a death certificate without a test if they assumed. Hospitals were paid more and with increasing amounts, then 3 times more if put on a ventilator. $40,000 US. We never heard about anyone dying from COVID in their homes, as you'd expect, with a deadly disease. All COVID deaths were oddly in a hospital. At the same time, hospitals were apparently overwhelmed. Choreographed and well-rehearsed TikTok videos of nurses dancing were going viral. Not surprisingly, videos were emerging from all over the world showing empty hospitals.
So there's nobody even in there?
Nobody's in there.
Nobody's in the hospital! How is that possible in a medical pandemic?
That's fake news, that's why.
No one was collapsing in the street from COVID, and the bodies of the homeless weren't found laying in the street. Animals weren't randomly dying from it, although at one stage the UK considered killing all pet cats to contain the spread. Super cheap antiparasitical drugs were widely reported by many sources, including The Lancet, to dramatically reduce symptoms, including Fauci himself, who in 2005 called it a wonder drug, prophylactic, and a vaccine. Then the media shills chimed in and branded the Nobel Prize-winning medication a horse dewormer and ridiculed anyone for taking it. Those who complied with the rules were assured they had superior intelligence and morals, and encouraged to see those who didn't comply as dumb and dangerous.
The last thing we need is the Neanderthal thinking that in the meantime everything's fine, take off your mask.
Then came talk of the jabs. The fastest time a vaccine had been developed before COVID was 4 years, with Ebola vaccine taking 20 years. But these arrived in 8 months and were to be administered to the entire world. And that's after previously stating that they never made a successful vaccine for coronavirus before. And these were apparently developed solely from a computer model gene sequence provided by the Chinese using blind trust. Drugs in a trial phase can only be given provisional or emergency use authorization, which in turn can only be granted if no alternative is available. With incredible timing, Nobel Prize-winning medications were banned from treating the so-called virus. The injections were still in trial phase, and Gates said,
"If you want to wait and see if a side effect shows up 2 years later, that takes 2 years."
Fauci once said,
"Well, then now let's give it to thousands of people, and then you find out that it takes 12 years for all hell to break loose, and then what have you done?"
The carrot always comes before the stick. Donuts, burgers, fries, beers, and lottery tickets were given out with every jab.
Just think of this when you think of vaccination. Vaccination.
Celebrities were paid a lot of money to advertise it. All the while, scary ads ran in the background. No open debates ever occurred, and scientists were blocked from talking with the media. Former chief scientific advisor to Pfizer was called a conspiracy theorist. The definition of vaccine was changed. The flu disappeared. Social media banned any criticism. People were told to turn on anyone who questioned it. Medical boards threatened doctors and health workers with regulatory action for voicing any opposition to the injections. Doctors received bonuses for every shot administered. The media was given tax exemptions for towing the line. Big Pharma sponsors the media, donates millions to both sides of politics, and heavily funds government health administrations. Despite all this funding and giving their money away, Big Pharma made record profits during this time. Bill Gates profits 20 to 1 on vaccines. He was also good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Pfizer had previously paid the largest fraud settlement in history for false advertising of its products, and it wasn't the only time. Yet for this product, they made sure they were granted immunity from prosecution. Less than 10% of adverse events are reported. Some sources saying way less than 10%. Governments refer to it as a poison. They said
you're okay. You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
And that it was a
Pandemic now of the unvaccinated.
But we know how that ended up. And when Pfizer was asked if it was ever tested to stop transmission, they said
no. We had to really move at the speed of science.
Even after all of that, the mandates stayed in place. Every bit of information that came from the TV was completely wrong. Every recommendation for better health was not only wrong, but the opposite for better health. What are the odds of that? They use dummies. They use actors. Some trials were conducted on 8 mice and 0 humans. Fauci was accused of torturing beagles. There were no excess deaths in 2020, but 17% in 2022, or even higher. On-field sports-related deaths increased tenfold. A practice run for COVID called Event 201 was held in August 2019. The blueprints for all supposed COVID mistakes were chillingly foretold in many preparedness scenario documents. Hospital cardiac admissions mirrored the jab administration. The once empty hospitals of 2020 have been in crisis ever since mid-2021. The FDA wanted 55 years to release the jab data. Excess deaths in each country mimic the uptake rate. A sharp increase of heart attacks and strokes was reported. At first, it was all quite a mystery. Health experts said they were baffled. Ignoring that Pfizer had updated the label to include heart inflammation, medical journals published a few articles on adverse events. Did I say a few? I mean a few thousand. Then the media finally admitted that excess deaths were occurring, but still nobody seemed to care. So they thought they'd just come out with it. And still, nobody seemed to care. And all along, the politicians that were barking at everyone,
go get vaccinated, America,
and calling them selfish for not getting the jabs, were exempt.
It's mandatory vaccination directions. I understand Commonwealth employees and court staff are exempt from the mandate.
Oh, yeah, that's not a watering down. That's specific advice, legal advice, and supported by the Solicitor General that there are constitutional and other legal protections for some of those groups that mean that a mandate was really not a recommendation for those groups.
And does that apply to MPs too? I mean, are those state MPs in the Parliament?
Yeah, I believe so. Again, legal impediments or legal recommendations that MPs can't be within those mandates. That's not to say that there aren't other mechanisms for MPs to be managed, but the Treasurer can speak to that.
To clarify, that is no longer... MPs are no longer part of the public health order?
No, MPs have not been part of the mandate for legal advice around that. But as I understand it, not required for MPs in Victoria as well.
So that brings this compressed summary of COVID to a conclusion.
We have all been tested for compliance, and most of us have lost miserably. Did you laugh when they chopped off Peanut the squirrel's head? It seems that nearly everyone did. Jeremy from The Quartering, Candace Owens, Saturday Night Live.
Exactly happened to your late husband, Peanut?
Well, the cops raided our house, and then Peanut bit one. Like a damn hero. Have you ever bit a cop, Colin?
Why would I bite the hand that feeds me pink cocaine?
Did you know that they also returned to decapitate the family's tamed pet raccoon? Are you still laughing? Maybe you are. Did you know that since the obviously fake bird flu narrative rollout, a nationwide coordinated effort has commenced to confiscate and kill hundreds of thousands of privately owned livestock, including cows and chickens, at precisely the same time as a global famine is gripping the earth? Furthermore, the execution of Peanut and the raccoon has established a now socially tested and socially consented to precedent for government workers to show up at your door to arbitrarily kill your pets and/or livestock. The avalanche of laughter in response to Peanut's execution has normalized this precedent. How long do you imagine it will be before government workers begin knocking on doors with the intent to extend this same murderous entitlement to your human family members? Are you still laughing? In Trump's recent successful Big Beautiful Bill, which has an off-putting semantic relationship to Build Back Better, a provision is included outlawing any AI reform to its contracted uses for a period of 10 years.
The U.S. president pushes a 10-year moratorium on any AI regulation.
That strikes me as just about enough time to wipe out and AI replace every last industry and job on the planet.
And it should chill you all to your bones. Now this is irrelevant of where you are politically. Now this man is Aman Jabi, and he's a 25-year veteran of working in Silicon Valley, as he's exposing the grand plan for digital ID. Now before we get into his words, let's look at the guy himself, shall we? Aman Jabi is an Indian engineer who worked in Silicon Valley, as I said, for 25 years. He's a co-inventor of 2 cell phone camera apps, and he emigrated to the United States in 1988. He claims because of America's culture of liberty. I think it's more than likely going to be money though, don't you? Now let's watch the warning, shall we?
Facial recognition will be used to unlock your digital identity, which is going to be a tool of control for the agendas that are coming down the pipeline.
Elements of that control are already with us.
Alexa, good morning. Good morning.
You are never alone in your home, and this is why. All your devices at home and all smart appliances, they are all connected on a wireless network. Many of these devices will have cameras, many will have microphones, and so they are monitoring everything all the time. Your smart appliances are communicating with the smart meter and sending it real-time usage data. If there's a Ring camera also in your home, a mesh network is formed, and all your devices are being tracked within the home, its location, its usage, and all the data is going to Amazon servers. When you leave your home, all modern vehicles are connected to the internet, so your automobile is being tracked all the time. When you're going under a string of smart LED poles and smart LED lights on the highway and in the streets of your towns and cities, those form a wireless network and are tracking your vehicle. They're tracking all the devices on you, from smartphones to smartwatches when you're walking on the streets. So data is being collected 24/7 continuously on every human being whenever you are within these wireless networks. And it's obviously not good for health also because of all the electromagnetic radiation. In the long term, the plan is to pretty much lock up humanity in smart cities, which is kind of a superset of a 15-minute city. They've sold all the state and local governments and countries that smart cities are about sustainability and the good of the city. But in reality, the language from the UN and WEF and their white papers is all inverted. So, air monitoring is really about limiting mobility and no car ownership. Right? Surveillance, control via LED grid is why the smart lighting is there. Water management is about water rationing, noise pollution is about speech surveillance, traffic monitoring is about limiting mobility, and then, of course, energy conservation is all about rationing heat, electricity, and gasoline. Another concept one should be familiar with is called geofencing, and think of it as an invisible fence around you where you cannot go beyond a certain point, and that will be related to your face recognition, digital identity, and access control. Your smart contracts, SoftBrick can turn off your digital currency beyond a certain point from your house. Our world has been turned into a digital panopticon. That means you can be monitored, analyzed, managed, and monetized.
Now that's scary, isn't it?
Why would somebody submit to an abject holocaust of individual opportunity? They would do so because 1, they believe there is no other way, and 2, because they trust Donald Trump.
Well, some sad news out of Switzerland. Goddamn Swiss people. Maybe it was a fake vote. I'm not sure about. They narrowly here approved a plan for electronic ID cards or digital IDs.
They sold it somehow.
Of course, this is the land of, the World Economic Forum and the gnomes of Zurich and all this shit and the World Bank and stuff. So it kind of makes sense.
All of my most recent videos have been composed in sleep. What that means is during a post-dream state just before waking, I have been having visions. These visions come with a scripted narration, as though intended to become podcast content, and somehow, even after waking, I can remember most of the words. It was in this manner that The Dumbest Generation, 3 Failed Exorcisms, as well as my video about Peanut the Squirrel came to be. My purpose in this reveal is intuitive. I am not trying to falsely style myself as a prophet, a peaked hypersensitive, or a man of prescient revelations, although I am just that. And most likely so are you too. What has been happening to me is no different whatsoever than what is happening now in the lives of all people of faith or spirituality in this realm at this time. The difference is simply the fact that most people, affected as I am, nudged by higher powers in their sleep or in waking life, are in a pernicious routine of denial and distraction, and can no longer hear when God speaks to them. Last night my vision and message was for Christians. It actually had a 2-part title. Last night's vision showed me what American Christians have become. Digital escapists and/or tech nerds and junkies. They have lost all sense of their spiritual admonition to come out from among them and be ye separate and touch not the unclean thing. In our modern times, Christians have actually become the main drivers of the unclean thing through the passive acquiescence of their own persecution. Christians are discriminated against in American universities, if lucky enough to make admissions, persecuted financially, denied the same charity tax exemption that drag queen organizations get, demoralized and dehumanized in all mainstream media, and as a result they have traded in their boldness of the lion for an agoraphobic existence of streaming, video gaming, and social media compulsion. When the government tells them to close their churches, they now eagerly comply. They have become consumers and cowards, taking on whatever social liberal trends they feel are required to camouflage themselves from the modern persecution. When is the last time you encountered a person of faith without a finicky smartphone in their hand? Now behold what is taking place. A biometric AI surveillance state is being erected nationwide, backed by Big Pharma, Zuckerberg, and the global mass murderer Bill Gates, who met with Donald Trump for 3.5 hours just before the White House announced the rollout of their Stargate operation, into which $500 billion has been poured. Since this announcement, I have seen Christians unanimously celebrating the nationwide staffing of data centers, as if cheering some opportunity boom and not their own inevitable future enslavement. Scripturally, a biometric AI surveillance state is the same as a beast system, wherein one's opportunities for advancement in life are relegated by unseen overlords. I believe that American Christians have now fallen so far that they are officially cheering the rollout of the actual biblical beast system. The man helping to make this possible is Elon Musk, who has already expressed determination to put a digital chip in all of mankind's forehead for a neural link. Incidentally, the Euphrates River recently dried up too, just for the record. The intention of the beast system during the tribulation period of the Bible is to fully control all buying and selling on an individual basis, so that no one can even exist without living in total obedience to the beast. A simulation of this intended reality was rolled out during the COVID mRNA push, wherein people who poisoned themselves with genetically altering mystery goo were given greater social and economic access than those who refused to poison themselves. A broader simulation of the beast system also occurred by way of ESG scoring and its resulting DEI discrimination of white people in America, with 94% of all new hiring in 2021 going to people of color. Even now, the Google Gemini program refuses to depict white people at all, even casting historical figures like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln as black. These are just mild tastes of how the beast system intends to control and convolute our lives. And in America, the Christian tech nerds are cheering for it. Now I want to pause for a moment and imagine a grid failure scenario, an EMP attack, or more likely the American government working with the power and energy companies to simply shut everything down. This would probably happen either in wintertime or during a heat wave summer. Suddenly you have no access to food, water, heat, or cool. Naturally, for the sake of survival, you would then need to barter or trade for your food, water, heat, or cool. What barter or trade items do you actually even own these days? Remember, a mass outage or EMP attack will render your phone, laptop, iPad, smart TV, and every last digital device that you own utterly worthless for barter or trade, which dramatically brings into question what actual value any of these items in your life have now. Frankly, you didn't buy any of these items to improve your life. In the first place, you bought them all because you are deeply afraid of falling behind the social trends, of disconnecting. For some time, FOMO has been your new god, and now, rather than a guiding internal mandate, the notion of come out from among them and be ye separate and touch not the unclean thing terrifies you more than anything else you can think of. The WEF puts out talking points about a future in which we all own nothing and are happy. The sad fact is that you already own nothing now, at least nothing of real value. In the event of a nationwide grid shutdown, the people with the most valuable barter and trade goods would literally be the Amish. AI has now destroyed the careers of writers, poets, skilled laborers, auteur photographers, filmmakers and editors, actors, clockmakers, farmers, pilots, as well as craftsmen and artisans from all walks of life. The Bible promises that a man's gift makes room for him in this world. That is the very form and function of nature, that we are all born with dormant talents which, when developed, become our calling in life, as well as our means of income, of security. AI promises to replace our talents, overtaking our functions, and ultimately enslaving us. Current economic projections have it that within 3 years, over 50% of all known careers will have been replaced by AI. This kind of dark evolution is a one-way street. Once you start in this direction, there is no going back. As a species, we are now confronting the greatest evil that human eyes have ever seen. Yet, being the hopeless tech nerds that they are, Christians continue to cheer. Please subscribe and or follow. You are not crazy. You know you are not crazy. No matter how many people have tried to convince you that you are. Stand strong and trust the soul you were given. This show is for you. For Brandish Productions, this is Daddy Brandish.